the city council chooses to pursue a ban, tying it together with a backup plan or alternative or fallback provision, I would not suggest is the best course of action to later defend the city. Our recommendation, if this is an avenue that the city council would like to pursue, is that the city council move now to approve the restrictive zoning ordinance that was before this committee and the council a couple of weeks ago. That would give the city the greatest protection now to be able to enforce something now and to have restrictions in place. That does not prohibit the council from continuing to consider the ban, how that would be written and considered by you. And while you continue through that process, I would recommend that the city have something in place by way of restrictive zoning. It sends a clear message to the to would-be businesses that where the city stands. It allows protection for enforcement and allows you to have something in place. It doesn't prohibit you from continuing to pursue this particular discussion and your thoughts about a ban in place in the city. So that would be my recommendation, that if the city council does choose to pursue the discussion on the ban, that you protect the city by taking some action with respect to the restrictive zoning item that is before the council as well, for some protection now.
We do know clearly that the petitioner, that a gun store owner has frequented the ISD counter and is nearing completion of his application for a building permit.
The first paragraph basically just, speaks to the ban, an outright ban, and it talks about, a penalty if anybody should violate it. And then as the city solicitor referred to, the second paragraph is an attempt to address the concern, and I understand the legitimate concern, that if a ban should be unenforceable, if it should be challenged in court and struck down, that members of the city council and the public don't want to be left high and dry and exposed. So to deal with that, the second paragraph was added, and it reads, if the foregoing prohibition should become unenforceable at any time and for any reason, the following provisions, which have been enacted in accordance with Chapter 40A of the Mass General Laws, shall apply to any business involving firearms. And it made sense to us. We are discussing alternative number 5. We don't have it in its final form, but since we've been discussing alternative number 5, when we do have final form, that language would be inserted into this. So in effect, what would happen is if the item were challenged and the ban was unenforceable, that it would revert to the restrictive zoning that everybody wants to make sure is in place.
This is a Second Amendment issue. So we shouldn't just look at the First Circuit. We look at the treatment of bans, firearm regulation, other municipal legislation of this issue to help inform us about where we believe a case like this could come down. And it also helps us to assess the risk. Yes, I would agree that this could be challenged through the federal system here in the First Circuit. But let me assure you that any case challenged up through the First Circuit on a constitutional issue will end up at the United States Supreme Court. And the courts will be looking at decisions that other courts have made across the country to inform their decision. And so our research is very broad, and we've tried to assess. No one can say with certainty what a judge is going to decide. If we could say that with certainty, there would be a case on it already. But there are a number of cases across the country that help to guide us in some way to understand where courts may come down. We also look at what the makeup of the Supreme Court is, where this would ultimately land.
And for me, the purpose of docketing the total ban item has been as much to have a full discussion of it promptly. And I've reserved judgment and will continue to reserve judgment as to whether I think it's the right way for us to go. But I do think we need to consider it and consider it fully.
U.S. District Judge Douglas Woodcock ruled on Thursday that the restrictions Baker ordered in response to the public health crisis posed an improper burden to the constitutional rights of individuals seeking to purchase firearms. That was in the paper. So I would love the law department to say, what does that mean? I understand that no municipality's ban has been discussed in the district or Supreme Court, but this is a particular item that was discussed in the Massachusetts District Court. So not for now, but when the time comes, I'd love to hear more from you about that.
So in my generation, including among many progressive young lawyers, there's a popular slogan about the courts, which is that the law is fake because everything is political. The idea that there's some kind of abstract, undeniable truth in the law or even in past precedents is naivete of the highest order. The only thing that matters in this discussion is our evaluation as rational adults who have paid attention to the past 3 decades of trends in the US courts and especially the US Supreme Court on what is likely to happen, not as a matter of law, but as a matter of likelihood by the 9 political actors of the US Supreme Court. It is wholly irrelevant fiction to point to a lack of precedence. This court could strike down all abortion rights or environmental rights if they wanted to this term. They could also strike down all gun control if they want to. There is no reason to expect anything better. This is not us making wild prognostications here. We need to make a rational hedge here and take a legally defensive action that not only protects Newton's rights to regulate firearms, but also protects the entire rest of the nation from a negative ruling that we might bring on. The strict regulation approach with zoning rules and a fair special permit process with a 2/3 supermajority affirmative approval requirement is more than sufficient to achieve our community's objectives on gun stores. So let's be honest about what the item is before us tonight and what it's really about. It's about trying to make some of us on the city council look bad for supporting strict regulations with high barriers instead of supporting a total ban. Some of the city councilors who are pushing this item are trying to regain control of the city council by any means they can think of, and they're planning to run a whole bunch of candidates against us, and they're trying to use this issue to manipulate the voters into saying that not all of us are on the same page on gun control in Newton. In doing so, they don't care about the consequences of this short-term thinking, up to and including a U.S. Supreme Court ruling striking down local firearms industry regulation of any kind nationwide. All 24 of us councilors and the mayor's administration are working to protect Newton from the firearms industry. Let's dispense with this cynical fiction that there's some subset of us who are not serious or committed to it just because we believe that a total ban is a terrible strategy for achieving our goals.
A couple quick comments, then a couple questions. First, I just wanted to make clear, it sounds like there's this undercurrent that people are concerned that a zoning, that it's the ban or bust. I will support alternative 5. I'll support whatever we can agree to. I would like to strengthen alternative 5. That's why I've been saying the things that I've been saying, but just to assure people watching and my colleagues, I definitely want to get a zone in place, zoning restriction in place as soon as possible. This is in my ward, in a part of the city where people feel dumped upon by the city. But that gets to my second point. Just so in response to sort of the passionate remarks from my colleague from Ward 5, this isn't a cynical ploy related to politics. This is because I personally don't want gun stores anywhere in the city, including the street, including Auburndale, including other parts of Newtonville. So I'm doing what I think is right to make that happen. People near 709 Washington Street don't want this, but either do people in any other parts of the city. So I'm really just trying to do what I think is right and what I think a lot of our constituents want. So it sounds like the other argument is, or the opposing view, or one of the opposing views is that, well, we should pass this restrictive zoning and people should just trust that a gun shop the street will never allow one, or that they won't go through the trouble to open one in some other place, or that the city council will never approve a special permit. I think that's asking people to have more faith than they should. I think that we should be acting in such a way that we are actually responding to what we see all the lawn signs saying, stop gun stores in Newton. So I just wanted to respond to that comment.
On what we're discussing right now, I would ask that we set the public hearing as soon as possible. If June 21st is the earliest date, then please let's set it. As for the final language, I think that Andrew could get that to us quickly. I'm not saying that others in the council may not want to weigh in on the language, but maybe folks have a sense of how the language would read and would give some latitude to the chair and those of us that have docketed it to see if we can get this thing advertised sooner rather than later. That would be my suggestion there. I agree with most of what Councilor Danberg said, and she's probably correct that if we pass restrictive zoning such as alternative 5, that we may prevent a store opening on Washington Street, but it does not prevent a store from opening or more than one store from opening in other areas of the city. And that is the problem with just going with the restrictive zoning. That's not what people want. I don't think it's what the majority of the city council wants. So I'm hoping that we can find a way to do both. And my final point is this. I'm not getting to get into a political debate, but I don't want something to go unchallenged that simply isn't true. As to Councilor Humphrey's rant about some kind of a conspiracy theory, I have no idea where his paranoia is coming from, but I want to assure everybody that it has, especially, I think my colleagues know this, but I think it's important for the general public to understand that that rant has absolutely no basis in fact.
We have set the public hearing for the item proposing a ban on firearm stores.